Welcome back to everyone. I will first give the floor to Kelly for a short sum up of her statement, and maybe choose also one of the many questions that we can address together, because in a short time of 40 minutes we won't for sure address all the questions. So Kelly, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Claire, and welcome to everybody. I'm really looking forward to this discussion with you all. I will give just a brief summary. Yeah, I'm at the Schola Cantorum Basiliensis. I teach Gregorian chant, and I'm a member of the management board there. Before that, I was a professional singer for 25 years, and I devoted myself mostly to medieval music, but actually I sang pretty much everything that was offered to me for a time. So a short summary of my video. I tried to deal briefly with each of the questions, and I'm going to try not to repeat what Isaac has already presented from me. Yeah, the name historical performance or early music, I don't know if we can actually achieve any consensus on this, but I do think that the name early music is outdated because it's all a matter of perspective. The question, our relationship with elitism and excellence, yes, I think it exists. I think we do have an ivory tower, and it's not just ours, but classical music in general, as well as musicological intellectualism, and that is a danger. But this attitude doesn't have to represent, it doesn't have to represent us, and it doesn't represent the roots of the early music movement. So if we can just reconnect with these goals and ideals, a sense of community, a connection of music with function, and this rediscovery of freedom of expression and curiosity. I was really excited about the comments that Tony's brought out in terms of repetitive musicians versus creative in the last discussion. The Conservatoire's influence on early music in professionalism and the venue of the concert stage, I think, is something that we might put on the back burner for today. The early music influence on the Conservatoire paradigm, yeah, this is interesting. I think the early music movement did widen the traditional perspective and opened up this focus on repertoire, the instrument, and the importance of virtuosity. And our approach continues to influence the Conservatoire. So we're looking for maybe a balance between the written and received score and interpretational flexibilities. And again, an accountability to a cultural context beyond our own experience. Something that I think really fascinates me for today's discussion is the future of early music departments and institutions. Yeah, we need integration within a larger institutional context. But we also need standalone specialist institutions, in my opinion, that allow the students to completely immerse themselves in a culture and language of their specific musical interests and contexts. So this is, again, balancing the all-rounder versus the specialist. And the specialist can be extremely specialist. 12th century Aquitanian Latin monophonic song can be my specialty. I see some people smiling at this. So how do you balance a specialty with being a generally competent musician? And how do we not isolate ourselves in this desire? A few thoughts for the way forward, and then I'll open the discussion. Maybe bringing in historical music pedagogy a bit more. How does the way we teach affect the way we play? How do we place musical training in a larger context of, say, a liberal arts education with classes on rhetoric and language, aesthetics and interpretation, teaching critical reflection and analysis without, as Anna Danilevskaya said, coming too short on the actual practice, this hands-on music theory, as Isaac said. And finally, how do we enable more outreach, making music once again for the community and with the community? So food for the soul. And with that, I have summarized my my video, and I would like to suggest that we open this discussion with the future of early music departments and see where it leads from here. So, yes, please. I would like you to introduce yourself with your name and where you come from.
Hello, I'm Mihail Giga. I am from Romania, and I teach early music in the Music University in Bucharest.
Okay.
This is a very interesting topic, and by chance, I'm interested in it for many years. Elitism and the future of early music. From my point of view, now we are on a Titanic, which is sinking, and there will be two kinds of survivors. Some which will get on the luxury boats, and some who will get on makeshift rafts. But the Titanic is sinking anyway. Classical art is sinking. Why? Because it suffers from two deadly diseases now in this context of COVID. It has Baumol-caused disease, which is unavoidable. I don't see any solution for now to Baumol-caused disease. And its cultural capital is destroyed. We have to know, to understand that Baroque music and classical music was made by the elites, for the elites, and with enormous money. Like Ballet de Cour costed like $54 million. An opera, Orfeo de Rossi, costed $54 million. A Ballet de Cour costed $134 million, because we can calculate the price of gold. It was for the elite and costed a lot of money. And the elite imposed this culture on the masses until the First World War, when empire collapses. And we don't have an aristocracy who can impose this culture. Now we are omnivorous culture, and anything is equal. Pop is equal with Beethoven. Everything is the same. And how can we maintain such genres which are very expensive, like opera? London Opera has 600,000 Facebook fans. Adele, the singer, pop singer, it has 62 million fans. So from my point of view, it will come a moment in which the players which replaces kings, the princes, which are European Union, the state players, cultural ministry, I think everything will be reduced, budget will be reduced, the Titan will sink, and there will be some survivors. Who will survive? Maybe they will be very, very, very good musicians who will take the luxury boats and play for the elite. And there will be the makeshift rafts with people who will join, I don't know, will make pop and Baroque or hip hop and Baroque or whatever. I don't know the answer, but from my point of view, we are in a cultural change moment, and I'm waiting forward to see how this will play. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mihail. That's a very interesting perspective. The image of the Titanic, I think, is fabulous, if controversial, perhaps, because we're not all in the same ocean. We all have our own perspectives, and also in a slight more or less secure situation. But I think it's absolutely worthwhile considering this concept and saying, where do we go from here? How do we maybe position ourselves as educational institutions to ready ourselves for the rougher seas? Ideas? Could I maybe bring in Anna here and ask maybe quite specifically, your ideas from the last session were so interesting about creating a balance between theory and practice. And we talked about this idea of improvisation also with Felix and Tönnies. Do you see a way forward with this, that where you think that early music departments, I mean, you experienced so many, are better equipped in the next generation, half generation?
I have the feeling, like in my experience, the model of Lyon was quite effective, because it was only a short experience. I went there for Erasmus. They had a kind of compact course. I think you have also that in Basel for some students. And I think that's a good way to go, because it gives you a package of knowledge which is very pragmatical, with many tools, and you don't have the time to be too repetitive. So you go really to the experience, and you go really straight to the point. And it was organized in Lyon so that every year you had one period of time. So every student studied the whole package. They studied, so the people interested in medieval studied also the Baroque, and vice versa. And I think that was very good, because it broadens up the perspectives, and it makes you realize also how many things are in common, because we tend to not do something because it happens like later or earlier. And you have like this big perspective, which is very enriching, I think.
Mm-hmm. What do you think? I mean, I gave quite a maybe a personal plaidoyer for standalone institutions having their space. A broad education is fabulous, and I think it's the basis for the education. But without some kind of immersion, without oh, I don't want to say anything too controversial, but without impurities, without mixing too much styles and confusions, I don't know how far we can get, because we're always building upon and questioning our teachers and our sources, and hopefully that remains. We never want to sit back and say, now we know.
Of course, but I mean, this is a good thing in theory, but we have to look at the practical things. For me, for instance, the idea of gatekeeper, so that was a word that came across like a couple of years ago, very much, and I think it's was stated officially after a symposium, that the idea of the institutions, different institutions being taking the role of gatekeeping. For me, it's a dangerous thing, because it's again the idea of that something is ours, that we have it between walls, that we might open the gate, but we might not do it. So we have the right of doing it. And it's also forgetting that what we do, the music, is actually from everyone. It's not ours. And yeah, I think ideally an institution should give many tools. And it's again the same thing that is important for me, to not confuse the tools and the goals.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent point. Claire?
Yes, maybe I'd like to give the word to Tönnies about, because you just spoke, Kelly, about the need to have an independent institute and very specialized. And Tönnies told us in former session about links with other departments in institution, and that could be interesting to Tönnies, if you'd like to speak a little bit longer about that.
I will try to. Thank you very much. Yeah, very interesting that Kelly also inspires us to go back to the roots of the early music movement. I think one of the key points of the start of the early music movement was that we, let's call it we, wanted to influence the musical world, right? And now I think we managed as a movement to influence the musical world. We should not deny that. We should and we should reach out to those people who are truly interested, who want to come to us to learn from us, and then we might also be able to learn from them. And then my goal would be to let go of those boundaries, to really tear down the walls between the different departments. It's all about music, isn't it? There's this isolation thing that one can still sense in certain areas of the early music movement, of the early music world. It seems to me such a hostile attitude, which is really unnecessary in most cases. And I've been surprised so many times by fantastic colleagues I had the privilege to work with, coming from the, well, here's the word again, the mainstream musical world, and they were so well informed, and they were so interested, and they kept on studying, and they kept on discussing things, exactly what we want to do in early music movement. So I would really like to make a plea for integration. And then, in my point of view, we still need the whatever you call it, but let's call it the early music department. We still need it. I think the early music department that I have the honor to be the head of is a center for knowledge and experience in early music. So we provide this knowledge and experience to our own students, but also to students from a little different perspective, the classical department. And they love to come to us, and they love to have their lessons with us to learn, and they love to enrich themselves with this kind of knowledge. And even also the teachers of the classical department get interested when you start talking to them. Let's again tear down the walls, have a discussion, learn from each other, and then I think we will still need the let's call it super specialists that maybe some of us are, to keep the discussion going and to keep to prevent the music and early music from becoming diluted. I think always new impulses needed. Thank you very much.
Yes, I'd like to add a short thing before we give the floor maybe to Pascal Bertin, but it's interesting what you just said. We need early music department. In my institution, which is a very small institution, we might have taken the decision not to open an early music department because there would be not enough students. But actually it's a very, and we have the same with a traditional department with 5 students. But actually the 2 departments, one with 20 students, one with 5 amongst the 100 students we have, are very active departments and very useful for all students. And there are a lot of connections between those departments and others. And of course, we need to train specialists in those departments, so it's very important. But it's possible also to send them for a while to Basel or Den Haag for mobility, to get immersed in a bigger early music department. So I think that's just our experience. But Pascal, you are asking about should every conservatoire teach everything in the field of early music. Maybe you want to add something about, or we could start a discussion about this question.
Yes, hi everybody. So I'm the head of the early music department in Conservatoire de Paris, and as well I'm a voice teacher at The Hague, specialized in ancient music. Of course, there are also some economic restrictions, which makes that in Paris, for instance, the department is not so huge, and we have to make choices. And in a way, there is year after years a kind of a identity in every school, I find, and there is a main difference between Lyon and Paris, of course, and it's also, although it's not really said, everybody knows that Lyon is much more interesting and effective in medieval and Renaissance music than Paris, which seems to think that the music was invented in 1640 around. But then, of course, it's kind of a choice of the students, choice of a teacher, because as well the students, they are interested to work with a main teacher in their specialty and in an environment, cultural environment of the school. What I wanted to say as well is, as Tony said, I find that the future, although it frightens some colleagues, is really in reinforcement of the links between the early music specialists and the modern classical departments. In the 80s, when a modern musician, instrumentalist, was trying to do some early music, it was very often, his knowledge was very poor, and there was a kind of opportunism to touch this kind of repertoire, to have more concerts and everything. Nowadays, the things are completely different. I find that the modern musicians are extremely well informed, maybe not as involved in the research as what we can find in some early music departments, but they have as well something to add, to bring to our world as well. And I find for myself, I think we spoke about that with our new director, Émilie Delorme, that in fact we will try to develop much more the link between the departments, to have more hours in what we call initiation or option, you know, for modern instrumentalists to come to the specialized class. So okay, I was a bit confused now. I don't know what was the the original subject, but yeah, that was just mine. But really, this question of should we all be ultra specialized in everything, or can't we think that some schools are as special identities as well?
It's an excellent point. I don't know if who can offer everything. Each school represents itself and its interests, and pulls the students to it who are interested in the same things. So not every, you know, from the point of view of the Schola, yeah, we start music in the 8th century, and every student has to have some of this in order to finish their studies. But that doesn't have to be everywhere. Other schools excel at different kinds of education or different focal points. Maybe if I just say, I think that Basel is of course a special institution. It is a standalone house, but within a set of 3 institutes, one for the classical, one for jazz, and us for the early music. And a few years ago, we did have the discussion of whether we should integrate and make one large department or conservatory. And in the end, what happened was the classical and jazz, which had been a unit, split apart rather than that we joined. And what we found, it's been 2 years since that happened, is that there's actually a much more dynamic communication between us now. And we have students from jazz coming to us. We do projects with jazz. We have teachers and students we share between classical and Schola. So actually, this actually helped me believe that you don't have to become an isolationist in trying to allow for a possibility of immersion, like learning a language, where you go to a place where it's spoken in its native tongue. But again, I really enjoyed Claire's point of the communication of the traditional and the early music streams at Poitiers. I think that's a fantastic and really enriching mutual experience. Claire.
Yes, I think Else has an interesting remark in the chat about the more she becomes a specialist, the more I know about different topics, fields, the easier it becomes to create openness. Else, would you like to say a bit more about that?
Hi, Els.
You have to unmute yourself. Yeah, great.
Looking where to do it. I'm sorry. Yeah, I was wondering. I think we have gone into a problem with a system like the Bologna system. The students are not allowed to get into specializing schools anymore once they've passed the age of, I don't know, what is it, 23, 25 or something. And what I've been discovering throughout my entire, what we can call career, has made what I am doing now on stage, I think, which has been, I've been going through jazz in the beginning. Well, I grew up with classical music, of course, with a lot of early music, because Belgium is going through a lot of early music anyway. And then go into a jazz school, go to Conservatoire for classical, then I went to early music. And then when I was 33, I went to the Schola Cantorum in Basel only. I mean, I was 33 when I discovered I could go into that even more. And all these mixtures have made me even more curious to go into other topics, and not just music. Also dance and movement, and why not electronic music? I've done a lot of contemporary music, and that only makes it richer. So maybe there's, I don't know if there's a way of opening up the schools again, the specialized schools again, with some, how could you call that? Some smaller elements that you could do over, I don't know, 3 weeks or over a year, but once every month or something, so we can connect with the different things that we're doing. I'm not sure if that was clear what I said, but.
So interdisciplinary block courses.
Yes, absolutely. And you can only do that if you have the chance, of course, to go into very specialized things. And you cannot do that when you're 20. I mean, when you're 20 and you're really interested in something, you go into it and more and more and more. But then you need 2, 3, 4, 7 years, I don't know how much, to go into something else before you can make real connections. And then you're 30 and you've done 3 different things. And that's if you're doing but that. And most of us do have a life also. So I mean, things are happening outside of that too. So
well,
yeah, and we need to go through. We were talking about sustainable careers in some other times yesterday, I believe it was, and I think that's part of it.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I'm very curious. What do you see that maybe to the whole plenum? What do we need going forward that maybe we haven't concentrated upon yet? I mean, I think we seem to. I mean, there's a plethora of possible approaches and ideas as to the idea. Osmosis of departments and specialization and general music education, and it's all fabulous. I mean, as Els was talking, I thought about Ken Zuckerman, who's an expert for Indian classical music, and he says, if you make a mistake when you're learning his ragas, then he says, oh, don't worry, you will not do anything correctly until you've been doing it for 20 years. So just make your mistakes. So this is also a level of specialization, but he went back and forth between medieval and traditional Indian music, which was a fabulous mixture. But where do you see potential for us as educators to go forward? Anybody?
Do you hear me? Yes.
Yes. Anna and then Tönnies.
Okay. I think maybe we are focusing on what the separate institutions, how they could be, and maybe it's at the European level that we should be thinking a little bit more, so that there is more balance inside of Europe, so that to study one repertoire, you don't have one choice, but you have at least two. And I think that would be very healthy for many repertoires, not only mine. And it could be good if students move more, if they are encouraged. There's already the Erasmus program, that's great, but and many people want to do it, but it also needs to be encouraged from the institutions. So to make it short, yeah, a balance, a little bit of healthy competition inside of Europe. So it's not necessarily something a special school has to change. It's more that, and we are at the AEC now, so I guess we can speak about broader context. It's about finding the balance, healthy competition.
Thank you. Therese? Oh, sorry, Claire is...
I think that Maria Luisa wanted to add something about organization. I know the time is very short, it's getting very short now. And Stefan Gies, you'd like to say something also? Maybe Maria Luisa first, and then you, if we have the time, Stefan?
Okay.
Okay. I'll be very short. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Yes. What I wrote, it was that I think that we have in our institutions the same problem with different departments like jazz, like early music and something like that. So I think we must find a way to cooperate in some way with these departments, because I see that people really, at least in Italy, goes through all these departments very smoothly in a way. And normally it's the best people that goes through all these experiences. So not everybody can do this, but I think good people and very intelligent people can do this and profit of this. And a question for the other institutions. In Italy, we have a lot of conservatories, you know, probably very near, very close one to other, and some institutions could collaborate also on early music. For example, the best example is the Baroque Orchestra of Veneto Conservatoire. So maybe I know that nobody can have anything, nobody can be Basel, but maybe if we are not in the situation like France, where you have these major conservatories that are very far away and can specialize, maybe other institutions come to sort of cooperation, and also cooperation with universities too, because maybe we lack some specialists on keyboard music, so we need to cooperate with Bologna. I teach in Bologna University for specialized in these fields. So I think that the future can be in this sort of specialization, and that helps also the money thing, probably. Thank you.
Thank you. So that's another call for increased cooperation and networking in order to expand the possibilities of the students. Thank you. And Stefan?
Yes, I raised my hand already earlier. My name is Stefan Gies. I'm the head of the AEC, and I'm partly responsible that you are coming together here. And I'm extremely happy that this worked out so well, because it's an extremely inspiring morning, I have to say. I just wanted to say, myself, you know, I'm an old man in the 60s, and if I look back on my career, I started as a classical trained music musician, playing viola in the orchestra. I did everything, contemporary music, jazz a little bit, leading a big band. But the only thing, or one of the few things I never was in, is the early music, so to say. But I was always extremely, from the very beginning, let's say, touched and impressed by how the movement came in. I remember its origins. It was some kind of counter movement. against, you know, people like Karajan, who are lost in being amazed about the technical possibilities of stereo recordings and forget about everything else. So, and I found it really refreshing, although I was never a part of it. And when I'm, after also being a head of an institution and all these kind of things, looking a little bit from the outside, as a critical friend, you might say, on this discussion, I'm wondering if you ask yourself, not maybe take a step back from asking, should we integrate or disintegrate? Should we keep an early music department besides or merge with others? Just to think about what might be, if I would ask you, what would be the one or the most important added value that you and the mindset that you have developed in early music in the last 40 years could contribute to further develop and to refresh what you are naming mainstream inside and higher music education institution. Because I think you did, I mean, they would not, this what you call mainstream, they would have been developed in a different way in the last decades if there would not have been early music departments, by the way, also jazz departments, who just were continuously refreshing them. So if you ask yourself, what would, in your view, what is the most important point you added to that extremely positive, forward-oriented development, so to say, what would it be? Maybe it's a question you should not answer right now because we don't have the time, but maybe inspiring and follow-up discussion. That's just my idea.
Thank you. Very interesting. And that brings us back actually to a couple of the points that we heard in the previous session of absolutely approach, mindset. And it is something that I think that we do share that's quite special, but that we do see across the spectrum these days. So thank you. Claire, am I right that we have to move on?
Yes, I got a message, a private message from Sarah that we have to close and to open our room to a new group. Thank you very much to everyone to this very inspiring and intense discussion. Thank you, Stefan, for your last question. It gives up us things to think about in the coming weeks and months. And I hope I meet you live very soon, all of you.
Yes, thank you, everyone. Have a lovely rest of the day and tomorrow. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Claire Michon from the Pôle Aliénor in Poitiers, in France, and member of the Early Music Task Force of the AEC. I will first give the word to Kelly. In case you didn't watch to her video, she will make a short sum up of her statement, and she will propose, let's say, one of the many questions we can address, one or two, and we'll try to keep on this main question because the time is so short. So Kelly, please.
Thank you very much, Claire. It's as the last session showed, the discussion can be very vibrant and can veer in many directions, but we often find our way back to the same path. So I'll just give you a brief idea. So I'm a member of the management board and teacher of Gregorian chant at the Schola Cantorum Basiliensis in Basel. Before that, I was a professional singer for 25 years, mostly specializing in medieval music, medieval liturgical music, but I sang pretty much everything under the sun, anything anybody would pay me to do. So I also enjoyed a really interesting and broad education before I specialized. So here's a short summary of my video. I dealt actually briefly with all of the 5 questions that were offered to me. The definition or the name of our discipline, whether it's early music or historical performance. I think this is difficult to answer. What seems clear to me is that early music is no longer a good title for us, because what is it early in reference to? And when does early end? So that might be something that comes up. What is our relationship with elitism and excellence? Yes, we seem to be living at the moment in a bit of an ivory tower, but all classical musicians, not just early music, and musicology helps us to achieve a sense of intellectualism that might bring us a step farther back from from audiences, but it doesn't have to be that way. If we look back at our roots, we see that there was the fostering of a sense of community, of a sense of function of music, and a rediscovery of freedom of expression and a curiosity in music that had been not part of the mainstream. This mainstream is keeps coming up today. We discussed a bit in the last round the future of early music departments. It was a hotly contested topic, I would say, of the idea of whether we need standalone institutions at all. My personal perspective is yes, because I feel that you can best immerse yourself in a musical culture and language if you are in a place where only that language is spoken. But this is not a general consensus, and I'm very interested in other opinions. There's much to be said for broad educational institutions that offer many directions. Another question was the Conservatoire's influence on early music. Yeah, I think it's clear that we gained the discipline gained a sense of professionalism, a focus on virtuosity, and a musical setting of the concert stage that maybe it hadn't been in its founding years. And possibly the question that I'd like to open up this round with is the early music influence on the Conservatoire paradigm, which, yeah, we widened the traditional perspective of the Conservatoire. We opened up the focus on repertoire, on the written score, the instrument, technique, the importance of virtuosity, and we continue to influence the Conservatoire. So the historical performance approach offers a balance between the written score that's received and the interpretational flexibilities, ornamentation, improvisation, partimento, controllamente. And it shows us a path for learning the language of music rather than just the repertoire and the specific piece of music. And it requires, so early music seems to require a sense of accountability to a cultural context beyond our personal perspective and experience. It places music within its natural environment of function and community, and it can lead in the Conservatoire to a crossover culture of all-rounders who are competent in many fields. So this is again not excluding classically trained Conservatoire students and teachers. This is actually an embrace, I believe. So having said that, I'd actually like to just kick it off and say, what are your thoughts? I'm very curious, and these are just my ideas that bounce around in my head. So I open the forum. Yes, Eric.
Yeah, thank you. Conservatory van Amsterdam. I just had a nice meeting with a lot of younger musicians, and then there was the question: if we are, it's clear that among the early music movement, if it exists, there's a lot of wanting to reach out to whatever, well, mainstream, classical department, whatever you can call it, but how, I think there's a risk that if we make an approach that is too much, listen to us, we have thought about it a lot, and now we're going to tell you how to embrace us, that's maybe not so successful. But what would work, even regardless if you would aim for an end of an early music department or not, that's I think that's a next question. But first, how could you really establish this connection in this conversation and exchange of ideas? Any ideas about that? I was wondering.
How do you could you say it again? How do you facilitate an exchange of ideas between different approaches or departments?
Yes, exactly, because originally the early music department was a kind of rebellious movement. That's a long time ago, I realize, but still teachers and conservatories often teach there for decades. So maybe the development in thoughts and forgetting about history in this may be difficult sometimes, even on a personal level. It could be. I'm not sure, but that will happen too. So what's the best open and positive approach to have this discussion, because we can agree within our group about what we would like to have it and how we would like to have to be at the edge of developments in society, in music society, because that's of course what we should bring our students, that they are developed for the future, not for the past.
It's a really interesting question. Tönnies in the last round said, he made the statement that among his mainstream colleagues and students, he often sees the most awakened and curious and informed colleagues these days. So, so I think maybe the first point is noticing that where we've made a delineated border, actually it's quite permeable. We can, there's a lot of consensus these days, not only in repertoire, but yeah, but also in approach. So what do you guys think? Mara.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi, Mara.
Okay, there's a couple of people in this session who have to bear with me because I shopped this idea around in the last session, but okay. I'm Mara. I'm a flute player. I live in Basel. I went to the Schola. I have been thinking this morning about my experience in my bachelor degree, which took place at a college in the United States called the Evergreen State College. And this is an interdisciplinary college. So they don't have normal class structures. They actually have, per term, you can choose a class which has multiple professors of different specializations. And it has kind of an overarching focus. And it sort of all goes around the discourse of this question or this topic. And then maybe in the end, perhaps this course goes over an entire year. And then in the end, the participants present their own independent project or collaboration that sort of combines all of these interdisciplinary elements into a performance or some kind of artifact of the coursework. I thought, wow, why can't we study this approach and incorporate it into like a totally new horizontal way of thinking about early music pedagogy or generally pedagogy in music conservatories, where we can just challenge not only our students, but challenge our professors to like take away a bit of their ego about like what is the right way and what is the totally correct way to interpret something, and kind of put everyone in the same room for once to see what happens when we have comparative pedagogy and comparative investigation of different elements of performance practice. So I thought, as an example, maybe you could have something like a course that was designed with an improvisation focus, for example, and you could include a professor on historical 17th century improvisation. You could have somebody from the free improv department, which we are lucky enough to have in Basel. And then maybe you could have somebody who is a specialist in comparative 20th century philosophy or ancient Greek philosophy. I don't know. But then as a structure, you could have like a weekly meeting with everyone involved where you examine a bit of theory, some kind of treatise, for example. And then you also have like another meetup, which is in smaller cells of groups, which is a more egalitarian discussion between like 4 or 5 members of this class to sort of break down the ideas and really challenge people to form their own ideas about the material. And then of course you have your overarching collaboration project. So I'm just describing to you what my experience was at Evergreen at this college, because this is what we did. And I would say, I mean, this was 10 years ago now, but still like these projects that we did there and these classes that took place there were things that I still think about and things that have informed me and caused me as a musician to really always challenge myself to make my own choices and really to internalize the things that are being shown to us or taught to us. I don't know. I think it involves like a complete overhaul of how we think of early music pedagogy. I cannot imagine how this would happen at some place like the Schola, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts on it. Yeah.
Super interesting. Anybody who'd like to reply, please make yourself known. But I'll just say this actually cues into so much of what I've been hearing today of the importance of interdisciplinary work across disciplines, outreach, etc. And what I liked, I see a couple of people already, fantastic. What Mimi was talking about in the first session this morning of as a range, offering a range of options rather than this is the right way to do something. I think this is absolutely where most people seem to be these days, but I think we need to keep going in that direction. And of course, my own hobby horse is early, historical music pedagogy. How do we get back to maybe pre-Paris Conservatoire models of teaching and learning? So Deborah York, please, why don't I give you the floor?
And then maybe Deborah, who has also a remark about that.
Yeah, there's two Deborahs. Okay, Deborah York. Your microphone is off, Deborah York.
Hi. Mara, I think you've had a very formative educational experience, and I went to a junior school which functioned on quite a similar way, and that's informed me in the way I think about education, and has informed the way I think about singing and making music. And I now find myself teaching singing at the University of Arts in Berlin, and probably not by accident, because it's the biggest arts university in Europe, and we are just, the music part is just part of this huge thing. And I consider it a complete joy to be able to meet different professors from different faculties and make projects including the early music instrumentalists on the one hand, with singers from my class, which is a general singing class, and Bildende Kunst and Mode design and all sorts of wacky, fantastic people. And I think it's a really exciting way to deal with this whole issue. For me, I don't like the phrase early music. I don't like the title early music. I really don't like it at all. Never have, even though people would say, oh, you're an early music singer. I would never call myself an early music singer. I'm a singer. Or I'm even a person who sings, would take it like that. On the other hand, I think the musicological side of things is incredibly important to me, which is why I associate myself so strongly with the early music movement. But I think getting away from these artificial structures, which institutions are, they create structures in order for things to happen. You've still got to fight against them. We need structures, but we need to fight against them. I think that's the point. So.
That's a lovely thought. And just to add, before we go to Deborah Roberts, the Schola used to be, before the Bologna system happened, back in the 70s and 80s, there was, in fact, very much the structure that you're talking about, with block projects and collaborations and interdisciplinary and everybody working together in a team of professors and students to realize a really in-depth delve into a particular repertoire. So the question is, how do we get back to something like this, or allow this alongside maybe a more traditional curriculum? But please, Deborah Roberts. We can't hear you just yet.
You need to unmute yourself.
Yes.
There.
Sorry, I was pressing the space bar, and obviously that's not working for this. Yes, my sort of approach to this, I'm not involved so much in teaching as because I direct the Brighton Early Music Festival, but we do work with young artists a great deal. And I think one of the things that often gets lost is a really dynamic approach to programming, which is my very, very great love. And you cannot program unless you understand the whole context, and that can be everything from you've got to understand the history better, you've got to understand the the sort of sociology of the time, understanding philosophy, all of these things. I just did have a slight worry that if you broaden out too much, that you might actually lose focus and not be able to actually program something which makes sense to people, particularly people now, because I think that if we're too much shut off in ivory castles, we're not reaching new audiences and younger audiences for this sort of music, which after all is 1,000 years of music, which is a line I often use when trying to persuade people to give it a go.
Just 1,000?
Yeah, well, actually, probably quite a lot more.
Thank you. We had a couple more. What do we have? Michael?
Yes, thank you very much. What I try to do often in my Baroque module is to link music with historical events, and that seems to interest the students. When I teach them about ballet de cour or beginnings of the opera, and I say, well, in 100 years, the French had like 11 Italian wars and 8 religious wars, plus something, and they invented this to cover the dirt, to cover the misery. They spend a lot of money to project power and emphasize the same. It interests them, and the impact of the 30 years war afterward and something like this. So for my part, I observe that history and culture interest them more than if I would just teach a music event.
This is actually a bit of a plaidoyer for maybe a redirection, or at least an opening back to the liberal arts, to opening up ideas of rhetoric, aesthetics, context, history, and embedding our music within all of this. So I think it does make it much more interesting. Thank you.
I see two interesting remarks in the chat. Stefano, do you want to take the word about research?
I can talk only like student, because I remember the easy way. I've studied Bordeaux saxophone, and after take other path in my studies and research. And what I've seen in Italian institution is difficult to have different ways, bureaucracy. And if I have an easy way to have access to knowledge and meet people and to go straight on my path and my interest, in an easy way, it's like no walls from institution, to have the freedom in my choices. In order to have that, if I have walls and difficulties from institution to have a look for ancient music or contemporary music or like that, it's really you have no courage, and you are limited a lot in your research.
What do you think about this? So absolutely, research is absolutely essential, and taking risks as well, and having the sense of freedom, but freedom with accountability, right? I mean, actually, you function more freely if you have a clear set of parameters to work with.
Yes, it's difficult to say that, because we have to be to have straight teachers, because we need a method to have an organization in our craftsmanship. But also, for example, I've studied contemporary music in Bordeaux, but now I understand contemporary music much more than before, because I've had the possibility to go deep in ancient music, because I think music is like a path. And if we have idea of not straight historic period divided each others, but we have the idea of only one line, is much more interesting, and you have so much more tools to understand what music mean, or also construction, or what you mean, what you want to do.
I think Else Janssens made the point in the last session about how being able to delve deep into a certain specialization allows you to understand a different one much better. So having an inside and an outside perspective on the same field can really be a great sense of, yeah, a three-dimensional perspective.
Yes. Oh, excuse me. Yes, maybe we could give the word to Nicolas, because I think the what Nicolas wrote in the chat is directly connected to what Deborah Roberts said, and maybe also Eric after Nicolas, if you're okay.
I can try. I don't speak so easily at the moment, thanks to COVID, after 6 weeks, but I do my best. So yeah, basically I think our task as early music teacher is to give a frame for the freedom that Stefano just mentioned. So the point is, I think, to invite the students to kind of, I don't like the word justify, but to understand the choice they go for, and to learn them how to be convincing in those choices, thanks to a musicological, or thanks to yeah, documented background, but also thanks to experience, taste, because there are things that we can justify not from out of a book, but from out of taste, which were for sure totally plausible in the past. So there are things that we can't really explain, and we see this very often in treatises, the bon goût, the buon giudizio, the good taste. So those are things that I think that diversity existed back then also. So that's something which is very important to keep alive today, but it has to stay within a frame. So something I said in the previous chat, there are things we know for sure did not exist, and were totally like against what technologically existed, or against the philosophy of back then. And it seems that we tend to forget that, and to say, yeah, but we can't know for sure, so we can do whatever we want. And that's a bit what I fight with as a teacher, as a conductor of a early music group, is that any proposal we make should stay plausible. If we stay in the possibility of what it could have been, if we stay in the respect of what we know for sure, and yeah, I get excited. If we stay in the frame of what might have been, and respects what they were looking for, respect the philosophy of back then, I think we stay kind of authentic, and we have a certain legitimacy in the same way they had. And for myself, I deal a lot with early 17th century Italian music, and in that frame they were totally, very clearly in a dynamic of research themselves. If you take Peri and Caccini, both were looking for the same thing with different tools, and both were right, but they didn't agree. And that's something that we can keep nowadays, and that's super exciting. I stopped speaking.
Thank you very much. Very interesting.
And thank you for your patience with my fluidity.
No, thank you, Nicolas. Yeah. Eric, did you want to add something in that discussion?
Thank you. Maybe a few words, because for me this kind of leads to the thought that, well, it is very nicely put freely within a frame, but this frame, well, Octavie Dostoevsky put it in the other session. She said, well, there's no frame early music and no frame modern music. There are a lot of frames depending on style and region and whatever you can think of. So that pleads for a much more connection within conservatories between what now is separated in two kind of spaces. And within that one space, you should of course have these frames, and you should guide students to where they want to specialize in or what they are really excited about, and then guide them in that frame to develop them into really good musicians.
Thank you. Further thoughts at the moment?
Yeah, I would like to add one thing, saying one of the comments. This attitude actually is totally applicable to any repertoire. And it's very nice because now I'm 35. I'm dealing with specifically early music for about 20 days. And I started 2 years ago to study symphonic conducting. And it's very nice because the teacher I work with, which is now a colleague in the same school, which is very great, Robin Engelen, is really applying the same approach for whatever the repertoire we work on. So would it be Beethoven? Would it be Stockhausen? Whatever. It's really the same kind of questions of attitude. And so for 19th century, all the questions and spores of clues of answers that we can find in the work of someone like Clive Brown are just fantastic. And I think that's that attitude is totally right for any repertoire. And the flexibility we need is to find as we would have said, the different frames, the different, and any repertoire we make requests other backgrounds, other knowledges, but it's very impressive to see the links between Lully and Mozart regarding the French overture. If you take Zauberflöte overture, but there are links that stay with Beethoven symphony, but sometimes the links involve with differences and clashes and different understanding of the same ideas that they think they kind of follow, but actually they just misunderstand and create new standards, and that's fantastic.
Thank you. That's lovely. Yes, Stefano?
Sorry for my English. And also, one thing I find is important is students have to have the idea to learn a mestiere and not to approach like a university. I think music is like a mestiere. I don't know in English. Craftsmanship. So to practice and to, like in Venice, I've studied that there was a contract, like a young man goes to an artisan for 3 years and live with them and have the opportunity to go deep in the live musician. So what I found is great is to have an idea of professional live musician while studying. So activities and to learn how to work, like a craftsmanship, like a craftsman.
Apprenticeships, like the old apprenticeship.
Exactly.
That's it. Mm-hmm. I completely agree. Claire, I'm looking at the clock.
Yes, we have 5 minutes left, I think, Sarah, if I'm right. Yeah. So we could go on either with Michael about the approach, or Stratton, Boo. I don't know who wants.
I'll just put in 2 cents. I'm Stratton. I have a group called Capella Pratensis that is a polyphony group. We're a little bit crazy about authenticity, performing from choir books and minstrel notation, polyphony, 15th and 16th century. So we're dealing with these things all the time. And I just thought it's such a good point that Nicolas made, the difference between freedom and free for all. And we can't know everything that was right, but sometimes, as he points out, we can know things that they didn't do, for sure. And we had a very interesting symposium a year and a half ago about tempo, for instance. Huge question in music, because music's all about tempo. And yet, let's say music around 1500, there is such a wide range of approaches to tempo, and I think the general idea is, oh, it's so long ago and they had no metronomes, so we can't possibly know what they did, so just go with what you feel. And that's such a it's ignoring a whole lot of information that's out there. And the idea of a frame is a really nice one. I like to think in terms of tools. There's a lot of tools sitting there for you to use, and how you apply them, of course, that's your artisticity. But the tools are there, and you shouldn't ignore them. So there's still a lot of amazing things that you can do with those tools.
Thank you. I think we're very much in agreement on this point of this being judicious. The difference between freedom and free-for-all, I think it could be the motto for future conventions, because I think that comes to the point. It's not just about our general personal freedom. It's also about finding our parameters. So it's fabulous. I don't know if anybody, there's something that's kind of been going on in the background of my head listening to a lot of this. We seem to be talking also a lot about approach, which we take very, very seriously. And it's the process of learning and an innate understanding of music that helps us to inform our interpretations and to create beautiful, spontaneous moments. I wonder what you think about performing spaces, because for me, after 25 years of performance on the concert stage, something that really helped me to readjust my relationship with performing music was seeing it in its natural environment, with understanding it again as a functional. Much of music is functional, and where is it done, and for whom, and how, and in what settings. So I'm curious. I see we've got a few organizers in the forum as well. I'm quite curious. It feels like it takes on more depth, context, and a relationship to the people in the room that can be quite different if one understands a function. And no longer the concert stage of the orchestra from the 19th century, perhaps. If nobody's interested in this,
Yes.
then it's just fine.
Maybe this, what you just said, Kelly, leads us back to the first remark of Mihail in the first session about what will happen. This Titanic is sinking, classical early music and musicians are sinking. What will happen? And context is changing. And maybe we should adapt better to new contexts and come back to the real importance of being linked to our local communities and put early music and classical music and all music there, and not dream of early music on stage of the Utrecht Festival only, for example. Maybe Mihail, I don't know what you think about that, but your Titanic image was so in the first session.
I'm a Romanian. I'm very extreme, but thank you very much. And I tried, and I was forced by environment to play in very, very different places, like pubs, like caves, meaning exploring salt mines, and there are some very strange places, but pubs and I think coffee houses are very interesting places for small ensembles to perform when you have a public who is not knowledgeable in classical music. And you have to make them understand and accept and like the music. They don't know it, and you have to make them like. What I observe it works best is to explain things and make them attractive. That works every time. To explain the things, but not like sonata form, to put some perspective, historic, this musician was a lover of this noble woman and something like this.
Thank you. I see a few comments in the chat that actually echo this point exactly. Yes, Deborah.
But I think actually that we have to close. I got a message from Sarah in the chat, private message, to say that we have to close and to go back, or actually to welcome the other participants to our session, because we are the main session. We are in the main room, and to the closing session. Is that right, Sarah?
Yes, people are queuing outside virtually.
Thank you so much, everyone, for the lively discussion. I learned a lot. Thank you very much.
Thank you.